Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Well, good evening, friends, and welcome to this March 30, 2015 edition of Nightcast. Opening story tonight relates to the Germanwings crash. The Alps co-pilot is announced in tonight's news as having had suicidal tendencies.
He's the man who dreamed of flying, but Andreas Lubitz had also wanted to end his own life. Prosecutors are analysing evidence from his flat in Düsseldorf. Today they revealed he'd been treated for suicidal tendencies. We don't know where or when, but we do know it was before he became a pilot.
Had at that time been in treatment of a psychotherapist because of what is documented as being suicidal.
Still no concrete motive, prosecutors say, for why he apparently did this. There'll be no bodies to bury. Teams are matching DNA samples to those supplied by relatives. The circumstances in which 150 people lost their lives have been described as unimaginable. No one knows for sure whether the co-pilot's mental health problems are to blame for what's happened, but already Germans are asking, are existing checks on pilots sufficiently robust? In Europe, pilots are psychologically assessed once at the start of their career. After that, there's an annual medical.
Even with our experience, we can't always tell if someone's suicidal. We can't look into someone's head. Even the most refined psychological tests can't do that.
Still, so much pain, so many questions. It may be weeks, investigators warn, before they have any answers. Jenny Hill, BBC News, Düsseldorf.
Well, friends, thankfully for those of us who are looking forward to being accounted worthy to escape the great tribulation to come, that would be the next major thing in prophecy to happen, as you can see from this chart of the seals from Revelation 6. The first four seals are depicted by four horses, different colored horses. And those horses are active now. They've actually been active since Jesus Christ, but their activities have accelerated. And Christ told us that when we see those activities really become intense, know that summer is nigh. And he compared that to knowing that the kingdom of God is nigh. And before Christ returns and ushers in that kingdom, there are a few more seals to go. There's the next seal, the fifth seal, which is the next major event in prophecy we're waiting to see happen, not with bated breath necessarily, but that's the next major thing in prophecy that's going to happen, is the fifth seal, which Jesus Christ described in plain language in Matthew 24 as great tribulation, mega trouble. And he also said in Luke 21, verse 36, Luke 21 being a parallel chapter to Matthew 24, also to Mark 13, and in Luke 21 and verse 36, after having described these first four seals in plain language and what to look for and what we would be seeing, what we now are seeing in increasing intensity, and then he said, pray about those things, of those first four seals you see with increasing intensity. Pray about them. Watch them and pray about them. And he holds out a promise saying, so that you may be accounted worthy to escape all these things to come. And what else was to come? Well, this next seal, the fifth seal, and of course the sixth seal, the heavenly signs, and the seventh seal, which includes 7 trumpets and 7 last plagues during the day of the Lord, a 1-year period. But this next seal, the fifth seal, the Great Tribulation, is a 2.5-year period. The whole thing, fifth through the seventh seal, is a 3.5-year period. And of the fifth seal, the Great Tribulation, are mentioned on a, let's pull out, let me go, not that far out, let's go just right here, and then let's zoom in on this behind me, the chart behind me, there's right in the middle, there's a crown, which is a picture of the actual crown of the Holy Roman Empire. And once this crown is worn again, whether symbolically or actually worn, it can be worn for a few moments, but it's usually suspended from wire from the ceiling. It's such a heavy throne. And gawky, big gawky jewels, as you can see on it. I've seen this I've seen this crown with my own eyes. It's on display in the Royal Treasury in Vienna, behind glass. And you're not allowed to take a picture of it. I didn't know that when I took my picture. The sign only said you can't use flash, so I took a picture without flash, complained to the guard that, hey, you can't get a good picture without flash, and the guard said, you can't take a picture of that in here at all, buddy. You take a picture of that, we'll confiscate your camera. So I very quietly sealed my lips and got out of that building because I had a camera full of all kind of shots from all over the place, and I had pressed my camera up against the glass behind which this crown is on display, held my camera as steady as I could, and took several different time exposures, 1 second, 2 seconds, half a second, I don't know, a whole bunch of them. A couple of them came out okay, but not as good as they would have come out as if I could have used flash. Of course, with glass, sometimes you got to get that. The flash on the glass can cause such a reflection you won't get your pictures. But I got a picture of this thing, and here's the main thing about this. It's on display. You can go see it with your own eyeballs. That crown is sitting there ready to be placed on the head, symbolically, really, figuratively, or really, literally, of the seventh head of the final of the Holy Roman Empire, the seventh and final head of this empire, an empire that the Bible calls a beast, a beastly empire, and its dictator a beast, who will work in consort with a woman who represents a religion, and the religion, the Bible calls that woman a false prophet. And the things that happen during this Great Tribulation are pictured on this slide. The main thing being it's called, as Christ called the whole thing, Great Tribulation. It'll be the time of a martyrdom of God's saints, biggest martyrdom this world has ever known. It'll be the time of World War III. It'll be the time the two witnesses are prophesying around the globe. And it'll be the time when, thankfully, some who are accounted worthy, as it mentions in the latter part of verse 36 of Luke 21, for those who watch and pray, Christ said, watch and pray so that you may be accounted worthy to escape. We try to help you do that on this program so that you're ready to be flown on the wings, on two wings of an eagle provided by Jesus Christ and God our Father, thankfully, who we won't have to worry about pilots like the one with this Germanwings plane, Andreas Lubitz, who had received treatment for suicidal tendencies. Put his picture back up on the screen while I talk about this. But he had received treatment for suicidal tendencies before getting his pilot license, investigators say. But no recent examinations, and or no recent tendencies either. But Lubitz is 27 years old, or was 27 years old, and is suspected to have deliberately crashed the plane in the story we just showed you here. He is suspected of having deliberately crashed that Germanwings plane in the Alps, killing all 150 people on board. Officials in Dusseldorf said the investigation to this point had revealed no clue to any motive. And you saw Jenny Hill with this report. How much motive does a person need who's wacko and subject to demon influence to do something like what apparently was done here? All right, let's go on with our next story here on Nightcast for tonight. And we're going to this is going to be a very short program here tonight. Friends, we're just going to cover this The big thing on Iran, this being Monday night with a deadline tomorrow for finalizing the thing. So the headline reads like this: intensive talks between Iran and 6 world powers have resumed in Switzerland. Representatives from the United States, France, the UK, China, and Russia, those are your P5, +1, Germany. Now, the P5 are your 5 permanent members of the United Nations who are on the Security Council and have veto powers. And those veto powers are important because that'll be mentioned in some details that I'll give you following this video report about this story. But these, and Europe, by the way, doesn't call it the P5 +1. They call it the P3 +3. They've got Germany in a more prominent position than being a +1, Germany being outside of the 5 UN Security Council permanent members with vetoing powers. Germany's in a prominent position in the P3, or the E3, I'm sorry, the E3 +3. The European 3, that would be Germany, the UK, and France. And then the +3 in that designation is the United States, the UK, and China. China being part of the P5, permanent members of the UN, but China not being a part of Europe, and China also not being one of the tribes of Israel. But then you've got the US and the UK and China lumped together as the +3, and then the 3 European countries, the being designated as the E3, the European 3, Germany, the UK, and Brother Reuben, France. But these representatives from 6 countries are at the talks in Lausanne with Iran's Foreign Minister Lys Doucet. Lys Doucet from the BBC is going to be hosting this video. These 6 representatives are at the talks in Lausanne with Iran's foreign minister. Lys Doucet from the BBC says all sides are hoping to reach an agreement. And we'll talk about that. And again, I'm going to have for you some comments from the advisor to a former Iranian president who spoke on December 11, 2013 on Syrian news television in a live interview. We've got that recording. I'm going to just take some slides and the English subtitles for what he said following this video. But Lys Doucet says all sides are hoping to reach an agreement on the basic outline of a final nuclear deal. How's that for talk for you? It's not a final deal. They're just going to try to reach a basic outline of a final nuclear deal, although even for the outline, there are, as she says, gaps remaining on key issues.
What the pressure is here now, here on the edge of Lake Geneva, is for the negotiators from 6 world powers in Iran to come up with what is variously described as a framework and understanding. It will send a signal to all of the countries involved in these negotiations and beyond that they have come to an agreement on the basic outlines of a final nuclear deal. And that would represent huge progress. And as they come toward, as they call it here, the 11th hour, the pressure, the pace is picking up. They are closer than they have ever been before in this 12-year standoff over Iran's nuclear program. But there are still some gaps remaining on some key issues. For Iran is which sanctions will be lifted and when. For Iran, it's absolutely critical that the UN Security Council sanctions are lifted. Iran also wants to maintain a research and development program despite caps on its nuclear enrichment, and the world powers are pushing back on that. So as I speak, they're gathering at this historic location, sitting down for their first full meeting of foreign ministers to try to wrestle with these last crucial details of what would be truly a significant deal on Iran's nuclear program.
Okay, thank you, Lys Doucet. Friends, significant deal or not, it still remains, like the former advisor to Iranian President Khatami said on Syrian news television live in an interview there. He said, we tricked everybody, and he said, we've got uranium hidden underground at a much higher percentage than we revealed. And the stuff we revealed at a lower percentage, yeah, we agreed just to get everybody to give us our sanction money back. We agreed we'd reduce that by 20%, but we got this stuff over here at a much higher percentage. It's hidden underground. We're working feverishly on it, and once we get it up to bomb level, then no matter what kind of deal we've cut previous to that, we'll make any future deals on the basis of equals, with one who has a bomb with one who has a bomb, and try to cut some kind of a meaningful deal in a situation like that where now they've already got a bomb, and that's their intent. I'll put the slides up in a moment with his comments. You'll see. He even said, as I played this last night, I've played this several times before. We'll put the slides back up on. I'm going to repeat this because repetition is a good form of emphasis, and I want to emphasize this, that advisor to the former Iranian president said on national television, December 11, 2013, just a few days after the Geneva talks originally started, where the idea was to have a final deal in 6 months. Those 6 months went by, and several more deadlines were set. Now there's a deadline for tomorrow, but that advisor to the Iranian president said that even when you conduct negotiations with Iran, you lose even when you think you've won. And that goes hand in glove with what former United States Secretary of State George P. Shultz said in an interview with the BBC in November of 2013, right after the Geneva talk started. The former Secretary of State for the United States said, George Shultz said, the Iranians are great rug merchants, like used car dealers. They, not all used car dealers are dishonest. I almost hate to make that contrast or comparison, but George Shultz, former Secretary of State for the United States, put it in these words. He said, the Iranians are great rug merchants. Rug merchants sell old dirty rugs. They clean them up and they sell them for top dollar, and they're the greatest thing in the world when they're selling them. They're the dirtiest, worst thing in the world when they're buying them. They buy them low, they sell them high. And he said they will smile at you, cut your throat, send you on your. They'll smile at you, send you on your way, thinking everything, hey, rosy-dozy, and cut your throat. We'll come back to those comments in a moment. I've got a follow-up story to this one with pictures. At this meeting well, I forgot the city here now. It's called Lausanne. At this Monday night meeting in Lausanne with the foreign ministers from the so-called P5+1, again comprising the U.S., the U.K., France, China, Russia, and as the +1, Germany, meeting with Iran's Mohammad Javad Zarif. The EU foreign policy chief is also there. And the caption with this picture that's part of this story here, friends, reads, Germany's Frank-Walter Steinmeier, right in the center of this picture with the glasses there, right in the center, Frank-Walter Steinmeier. I have a horse named after him. That's right, I named my horse Frank-Walter Steinmeier. I did that on purpose, so whenever I see Frank-Walter Steinmeier come up in the news, I'm really, really watching what the news story is about and focusing on what Mr. Steinmeier has to say and what he's doing. There are reasons for that, and I'll talk about that another time. But Frank-Walter Steinmeier of Germany said the end game, quote unquote, of the negotiations had begun. The negotiators are aiming to agree, as the former report pointed out, they're aiming to agree on a political framework by tomorrow night, Tuesday night, that would set the stage for talks on the technical details of a comprehensive accord due by June 30. So see, tomorrow's not the final date. It's just tomorrow to have a framework for what'll be hopefully a final agreement, hopefully by them, a final agreement by June 30. All the meanwhile, more stalling time, more time for the Iranians with that underground operation going on that the former advisor to Iranian President Khatami said on public television, on Syrian news television on December 11, 2013, saying that they're working on this stuff, bigger stuff than they told you about, and that they got plans to defeat the Americans and the West. But here's a quote from UK Foreign Secretary. He said, at this meeting, he said, "We are here because we believe a deal can be done." But, friends, that was Philip Hammond, UK Foreign Secretary, who said that. But a deal is meaningless if you understand what U.S. former Secretary of State George P. Shultz said. They will smile at you, send you on your way, and cut your throat. And especially if you understand what the advisor to former Iranian President Khatami said on December 11, 2013, on public television out of Syria, television news, in the Arabic language, but we got the English subtitles at the bottom for those of you that want to watch that. That's in our archive. He said that we tricked the United States. He said that when you conduct negotiations with Iran, you lose, even when you think you've won. So in other words, he's saying, you can't trust us. We'll cut you, we'll smile at you and send you on your way. You think everything's rosy, hunky-dory. We signed this old piece of paper. Hey, as soon as we get our bomb, that piece of paper is meaningless. We will cut your throats. We'll blow you off the map. And all of Israel, America, Israel, the UK, we'll blow all you guys off the map, and our intent and aim is just like we had during the days of what Purim is all about, that Queen Esther had to go before the king about, because that evil man Iran is the former Persia, that evil man of Persia, whose name, when it's mentioned on Purim, everybody shakes their little rattlers. Yeah, because his name is horrible to Jews, because this man attempted to have all the Jews killed. He talked the king into doing a thing to kill all the Jews. And then the king was all distraught about it when he learned from his wife that was her people, Queen Esther. And through some wisdom, he was able to do a counter. In his laws, a king's law cannot be changed. Well, he was able, through wisdom, to do a law that said those that wanted to kill the Jews could be killed. And so with that new law, it was had a balancing effect, and then the Jews wound up surviving, thankfully. But it's in their blood. It's in the Persian to revive this thing that Purim was all about, to kill off the Jews. Purim is the opposite of that. Purim was the celebration that it didn't happen, of course, but Purim tells the story of that whole thing. Their meeting began last night, carrying on. People began arriving last night. Their big meeting is tonight. Some of the UK Foreign Secretary said it has to be a deal which puts the bomb beyond Iran's reach, he added. However, you guys, you can write that in paper, all up on the piece of paper, all you want. But when you're dealing with a criminal element like Iran, they'll smile at you, send you on your way, cut your throat. You can't trust them. They're working on something underground. They'll develop a bomb, and then they'll say, well, now we got to renegotiate. Bomb for bomb. We got bombs. You got bombs. What kind of deal would you like to cut? You want us to shoot ours first, or you want to shoot yours first? Why am I laughing? I thought so funny. Except we know, those of us who know prophecy know that that we anticipate God says He's going to use the Assyrians to do what God tells us will happen if we don't repent as a nation of not keeping God's laws. We can expect all of our cities to be laid waste, as Ezekiel said in chapter 6, verse 6. All your cities will be laid waste. That's with nuclear weapons. What if God decided, God leaves Himself a lot of options. What if God decided, well, I think for your foolishness, Mr. Kerry, Mr. Obama, the rest of you in the United States who are not obeying my laws, and that's the real problem, is not these men. We get these men because the majority of people in the country are not obeying God's laws. Read Leviticus 26, read Deuteronomy 28. They're not that long chapters. They won't be that big of a burden to open up your Bible and read. In the first half of each of those two chapters we've often called the blessing and cursing chapters, begin with God enumerating the wonderful blessings He will give you as an individual and collectively as a nation if you obey Him, if you diligently hearken to His voice, walk in His statutes, keep His commandments, His statutes, His judgments. He'll bless you royally. He'll make you the head, not the tail, the lender, not the borrower. 5 of you will chase 100, 100 of you will put 10,000 to flight. You'll get rain in due season. That means no floods, no drought, because rain in due season means the proper amount of rain at the right time. So your fruits and your vegetables will grow and be plentiful, and we won't have famine. But He then goes on in the last half of each of those chapters and says, if you don't obey me, then just the opposite of those blessings as curses. And then if you still continue not to obey me, I will continue to increase those curses 7 times. And then if you're still not obeying me, as verse 19 of Leviticus 26 says, as a nation I will break the pride of your power. So, fellows, especially you that are part of the representatives that are from the tribes of Israel, especially you who should know better, who should know you should be keeping God's law. No matter what you do on paper with these Iranians, it's going to depend on what we do as a nation and with respect to keeping God's law. And there is a certain amount of wisdom. If you're going to be a nation with a military, you got to act like it and let your military if the sanctions are, hey, be it far from me to tell them how to run this business, but we do know from God's Word why we're having certain things, and we do know that we've got the senior statesman, which compares to how Solomon's son, Rehoboam, ignored Jeroboam's coming to him and saying, look, don't tax us so heavy, and we'll submit to you. He went to his senior advisors first, and they said, go along with Jeroboam and the 10 tribes because they'll stick with us. We don't need to tax them so heavy. Go along with them. Well, Rehoboam didn't like that advice, so he got some of his peers together, younger men, his age, and put it before them. They said, nah, tell them that you thought my dad was bad with the taxes. I'm going to tax you double. And so he followed the younger fellow's advice, and what happened? The 10 tribes rebelled, and Jeroboam took them up to Samaria. And then next thing you know, Jeroboam, not so wise, is changing God's time for the feast from the 7th month to the 8th month, and the weekly observance from the 7th day to the 8th day, or in other words, 8th day being back around to the 8 days a week, back around to the first day of the week, worshiping on the day of Baal, because he was afraid everybody would go back to Rehoboam if we continued keeping the Sabbath. He especially thought that would happen in the 7th month during the Feast of Tabernacles time, so he creates a feast in the 8th month for everybody so he could keep them under him. Most people weren't going to want to go back to Rehoboam for those double taxes anyway, so... But the bottom line is the tribes became lost following that. Now, I've got an analysis. Hey, and even though they said in this meeting there can't be any compromise about a deal which puts the bomb beyond Iran's reach, even those words, friends, don't matter, because you put it down on paper, blah, 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 this or that or the other thing, Iran could care less. They're going to keep on like that former advisor to the Iranian President Khatami said on statewide, countrywide television in Syria, on Syrian news television on December 11, 2013. He said, we're working on this stuff underground that's at a higher percentage than what we told you about. And he's just open about it. And hey, NSA, when are you guys going to admit you knew about this and either didn't tell the president or you did show it to the president and the president had his reasons for ignoring it? Mr. Kerry, are you ignoring this kind of intelligence? It was on public television on December 11, 2013. And in fact, here, let me just tell you a little bit more about this story. I'll give you analysis and then I'll put the slides up that feature the former advisor, Mr. Mohammed Sadak al-Hosseini, and a few comments that he made. I'll put them on the words up on the screen behind me so you can just visualize it as well as having heard me say it. But here's an analysis. At the scene, Lise Doucette from the BBC News says the following. This is her analysis from being on scene. She says, it's going down to the proverbial wire in this crucial round of nuclear talks. One Western diplomat spoke of, quote, some quite important gaps. Two main disputes continue to be which sanctions will be lifted and when, and what kind of nuclear research and development Iran can still pursue. As Iran's team sits with all 6 foreign observers, or I'm sorry, all 6 foreign ministers from the 6 countries, observers say it is still not clear if they're engaging in high-stakes bargaining or have no political space to move forward. For Iran, elements like ending sanctions tied to UN Security Council resolutions matter in financial and political terms. For world powers, putting the bomb beyond Iran's reach, quote unquote, is the main imperative. All sides indicate talks could slip past Tuesday's self-imposed deadline into the early hours of Wednesday. All sides use the word tough, T-O-U-G-H, tough, or T-U-F-F, if you want to spell it a fun way, to describe this historic endgame. Even if they agree on a framework, there's still a huge amount of work ahead to draft a final deal by the end of June. And then, friends, the caption with, this is the caption for this picture. This is the picture for this caption. It reads, Iran's representatives at the talks want a, quote, precise framework for the lifting of sanctions. Well, sure, Iran. They're making their demand very explicit and very precise. They want exact wording about how and when and how much the sanctions will be lifted, and they're playing tough on that, you know, and then they're going to eventually by June make some deal on paper that is going to be meaningless, as the former advisor to Iranian President Khatami said again on Syrian news television live on December 11, 2013. Before we go there, though, just a little more in the text of this news story from the BBC on this for today. The restrictions would last at least a decade, is what their framework is proposing. The restrictions would last at least a decade. Boy, Israel, after 10 years, then you can be wiped off the map. You know, these 6 representatives, they're only going to give you 10 years of a written deal that you can't trust anyway, and then the limits, whoop, go up in smoke, just puff, as if they go up in smoke. And the world leaders of today, 10 years, they don't care about Israel's existence 10 years from now. But they want them to last at least a decade and include rigorous inspections of its nuclear facilities. You know, they've had UN resolutions that required inspections of Iran's nuclear facilities already, and they haven't been able to get into all of them and inspect because Iran, oh, no, you can't come in here, you can't come over here. And that was written. So you see, there's already an ill-fated track record of non-cooperation by Iran on the deals and on the things that it's supposed to do. But they say in this deal they want rigorous inspections to be written into the deal, inspections of Iran's nuclear facilities in exchange for an end to crippling sanctions. Okay, all right, now let's take a look at I'll put the text of some of the comments by the advisor to the former Iranian President Khatami, some comments by Mr. Mohammed Sadek al-Hosseini that he made on Syrian news television, broadcast live on December 11, 2013. We've got a recording of it with English subtitles. He spoke in Arabian language. I'm not going to play that video tonight. I've played it a number of times here on our program. It's in our archive. You can easily go find that recording in our archive. But here's a few frames from the program and some of the subtitles below the frames as to what Mr. al-Hosseini said. He said, first of all, let me back up. He said, "We were preparing a large quantity of enriched uranium so that when it is reduced," later on in the interview he continues his statement and explains that, you know, when it's reduced it's meaningless anyway, and beside that's not the only enriched uranium we had, he said. But he interrupted him right here at this early point of the interview where he said, so that when it's reduced, and then he stops himself and says, incidentally, for your information. And for your information, he's talking to the P5+1. He's talking to the 5 representatives, the permanent members of the UN Security Council who have veto powers, +1 plus Germany. He's saying, for your information, guys, when you, because who else is conducting political negotiation with Iran but those 6 representatives? He says, when you conduct political negotiations with Iran, you lose, even when you think you have won. And he said it right there on live Syrian news television on December 11, 2013. He said exactly what the former United States elder statesman, former United States Secretary of State George P. Shultz said they would do. He says they'll smile at you, send you on your way, and cut your throat. They're great rug merchants. And here's Mr. al-Hosseini backing up what former United States Secretary of State George Shultz said. He said, you lose when you conduct political negotiations with us, with Iran. You lose even when you think you've won, because our word's no good. We'll say anything to get your head on the chopping block, to get you in position where we can, sock it to you, cut your throat. So there's the whole statement altogether. Incidentally, for your information, when you conduct political negotiations with Iran, you lose, even when you think you have won. Yep, we'll smile at you, send you on your way, and whoosh, cut your throat. Friends, that's it for tonight's Monday night edition of Nightcast. God willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll be back again. By the way, there was much more that was said in that interview. You might want to go look in our archive, find it, play the whole thing, because he later in the program just outright said it, and he and the host laughed about it as they said it. we have other uranium underground. We haven't told you about it. It's at an even higher percent than what we told you about. So even though, you know, we got it up there real high so that when we reduce it, it's still capable of being, you know, made something out of this. But that ain't the only stuff we got. We got stuff we didn't tell you about. And he openly says, we tricked you guys, and we're at war with America and the West, and we plan on a 300-year defeat to counter the defeat that Alexander the Great did against Persia back when he beat Persia. Alexander the Great having... let me just come out here for a moment. Do we have that on our screen? Well, yeah, I'll go over that with you another time because I need to put another slide up on the screen to tell you that, friends. So I'll go ahead and say so long for tonight, this Monday night, God willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll be back for another short program. I'm going to make short programs the rest of this week if I can get away with that, if the news will allow it, because this week, for many of you who follow this program, you already know Thursday night at sunset, Passover begins. Many of us will take a break for the foot washing service that evening, part of the annual the annual Passover memorial. I did it for so many years. I did, how many Passovers did I do in Pasadena? At least 3 decades worth in Pasadena. So Passover, Pasadena is almost synonymous for me, but not anymore. We'll be doing a live program on another channel Thursday night at the first half hour immediately following sunset in each of the 4 time zones in the continental United States. So right after, on the half hour, right after sunset, Thursday night, we'll have that service rolling each hour in each of the 4 time zones throughout that evening. And it'll be conducted by Mr. Herbert Armstrong. It's a recording of the last Passover service that he did before he died. And we'll have little pauses in between for the necessary elements, the foot washing, the taking of the bread, the drinking of the wine. Friends, I was signing off, so let me wish you a happy, wonderful Monday evening, God willing, and Creek Don't Rise. We'll be back again tomorrow night, Tuesday night, here on Nightcast. Until next time, we are on your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Thank you for joining me tonight. So long and good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.